Welcome everybody to our webinar tonight that we've entitled Inside the Sponsorship Department of a Football Club. We have the great pleasure as having as our invited speaker guest, Richard Lamb. In a moment, I'm sure Richard will introduce himself and tell us a little bit about his background, his experience in the sports and the football industry particularly. Just to give you a little bit of background on his profile and why it's a very interesting webinar with him tonight. Rich has worked in the football industry for a number of years in the past for clubs including Manchester United, Inter Milan, West Ham, and always in roles at an executive level, particularly in the commercial department and in the sponsorship department of football clubs. So he will expand on that a little bit further on. So Rich, welcome tonight. It's a great pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Diego. Great to be back.
Fantastic. So for those of you that may not be familiar with who I am, my name is Diego Valdez. I'm the CEO at the Sports Business Institute Barcelona. We are commonly known as SBI. So for some of you that already know us and have done programs with us, it's great to see you here. And for those that are new, for those that it's your first time connecting, we hope that you enjoy the webinar tonight and get to see a little bit about what we do and how we operate at SBI. I'll go through the structure of the webinar tonight for you to understand a little bit more as to how we're going to plan it out. We should be connected for about an hour. So that's what we anticipate is going to be the duration of the webinar tonight. And the way we're going to structure it is I'm going to provide a little bit of an introduction, very briefly, but an introduction as to who we are at SBI. Give you an opportunity to find out a little bit more about what we do at the Institute, the programs that we offer, and how we aim to add value to the football industry. After that, we're going to move on and begin with the subject at hand, and we're going to have a few questions that we've prepared with Rich to discuss how sponsorship works in the football industry. The aim of tonight is for you to get really detailed insight as to how sponsorship actually works in football. What are the keys that we need to understand? And someone like Rich, who's worked in the past for a number of these clubs that I mentioned before, is going to be very interesting to hear his insight. We're also going to talk briefly about our Master in Football Business and Management program, which starts in October. And part of the reason why we're doing this webinar is in a way to provide you an inside look as to how a master class would look like, or similar to what a master class would look like in our master's program. So for you to understand what the dynamic is in an online environment. And then we're going to turn it over to you for your Q&A, a period of Q&A for you to answer your any questions that you may have for Rich. Obviously, tonight, we're very much focused around sponsorship. However, the master program that we offer, the Master in Football Business and Management, covers a wide array of topics, including finance, operations, digital, in this day and age, crypto, etc. So the master itself prepares you for many roles within the football industry. And of course, tonight, we're going to focus it around sponsorships. Right, now before turning over to our introduction on SBI, we always like to know where you're connecting from, because that tells us a couple of things. Well, number one, obviously where you're coming from, and that's always very interesting for us to see. And then also that tells us that the sound is working properly and that you guys can hear us. So I see that some people have already started putting in the chat box where they're connecting from. And as you'll see, Rich, as per usual, it seems to be quite a global audience. So I see that we have here Mohit from Pune, India, Rob C from Edinburgh. So hi, Rob. Elizabeth from Maputo in Mozambique. Hi, Elizabeth. Ali from South Korea. Bo, hi, Bo. Nice to see you from Amsterdam. Ricard from Zurich. Christina from Sofia. Hello, Christina. Johannes. Hi, Johannes from Vancouver. Nice to see you, Johannes. Sean as well from Uganda. Hi, Sean. Who else do we have? Fede from Buenos Aires. Hola, Fede. As well as Alan. Hola, Alan from Chile. Right, Silvia from Madrid. Nicholas German in Maldives. Hi, Nicholas. We have Franco. Hi, Franco from Bucharest. Nice to see you, Franco. We have Alexandra as well from Bucharest. Kobe from Ghana. Jarek from Poland. Alejandro from Bolivia. Richard from New Zealand. Hi, Richard. Justin from France. Okay, well, the list goes on. So Finland. We have Ashi, Junyu, Tim from Belgium. Okay, so great to have everybody connecting here tonight, and thank you for putting that in the chat box. As I said, we always like to make our webinars very interactive, very dynamic, and very personal, because we believe that you're spending time with us, valuable time, and we want to make sure that we deliver for you the value that you're here to get. Right, so very briefly, who we are at SBI. Well, as I've put here on the header, helping professionals grow, network, and lead, and that's our claim at SBI. We really believe that when people come to our programs, they're here to develop themselves, to grow, to make connections, to make meaningful relationships and network, to eventually be able to position themselves to lead or to work in the football industry in a leadership position. Obviously that's the goal, and sometimes it means working from a more entry-level position, but nonetheless it's always about that personal development. We established in 2012, so this year marks our 10-year anniversary in the market. So we've been around for a number of years, always with the aim of helping you become more prepared to either start or advance a position in the football industry. We're based in Barcelona, but we offer online and blended programs worldwide. So that's why our alumni is from over 83 countries. And to this date, we've had around 3,200 students do our programs from across different programs, masters, courses, webinars, etc., that we've offered in these past 10 years. Our aim is to work with the top clubs, federations, tournaments, agencies, and professional football players, mainly because the more connected we are to the football industry, that means the better options we provide to you, our students, and our global community. We like to call ourselves a family. You see some pictures here from what we do at SBI regularly throughout the year. So these are some pictures from our master's programs, from our short online courses, and from some of the B2B operations that we also do across a number of federations, clubs, and other sports organizations. So you see a little bit of a blend there. Our offices are, as I said, in Barcelona. So if any of you are ever in Barcelona, please don't hesitate to contact me or our team at SBI. The doors are always open. We've also worked with professional footballers, and we're very proud to say that they've trusted us, some of them very high-profile players that play in leagues such as the Premier League or La Liga or some other leagues around the world, not only from the men's game but also from the women's side. And some of the names that maybe some of you recognized include Troy Deeney, who's obviously been in the Premier League for a number of years, at Watford and now playing at Birmingham City in the Championship, Matt Ritchie at Newcastle United, Wes Morgan from Leicester City, as well as many other players, like I said, from leagues in Spain, Latin America, Europe, Asia, and then a few female players that you'll see there, like Danielle van der Donk of the national Dutch team, Rocky Rodriguez of Costa Rica. We also have on the far right a picture of Nathaniel Chalobah, former England international and current player for Watford. Anyway, a little bit of background, as I said, as to what SBI does, who comes and participates in our programs, in our webinars, in our different executive education courses. We're very proud to say that our alumni now work for some of the top clubs, federations, brands, agencies in sport. Here you see a screenshot of some of them, but there's many, many other clubs and federations and properties where we have students working at currently. And of course, that again makes us very proud, because it makes us understand that we're delivering value to them and that we're accomplishing our mission, which is, of course, to, as I said, helping everybody grow, network, and move into a position in the football industry. So that's a little bit about who we are, what we do at SBI. But of course, tonight is not about us. Tonight is about you. We are here to deliver value to you. And that's why we've invited Rich, who's going to talk a a little bit in more detail as to how sponsorships work in the football industry, and particularly inside a football club. You're going to see that we're going to dig deep, we're going to unpack a number of issues, and of course, at the end, we're going to open it up for your questions. So without any further delay, Rich, like I said, it's a great pleasure to have you here. For those of you that may not know, Rich is also the academic coordinator of the Master in Football Business and Management, which starts in October. So it's a great pleasure to have you here, Rich. Welcome. We're really delighted to hear what you will have to share with us tonight.
Thanks very much, Diego. And it's really good to meet everyone online here.
Fantastic. Well, let's begin with your experience. So obviously I know very well your career path, but for those that are joining us here tonight for the first time, tell us a little bit more about how you got into the football industry, where you've worked, and how you managed to gain this experience working in football.
Thanks, Diego. My entry into the football industry is probably a little bit different from most. Most of my career was spent working in Asia, predominantly China. And I was working in the real estate industry in China when back in 2010, when someone approached me about a potential job in the sports industry. And I couldn't quite see what the overlaps were between the real estate industry and the sports industry. But when it came to sponsorship, there was some very strong overlaps in a sales perspective. So it turns out that sports job was working for Manchester United. So I packed my bags and moved down to Hong Kong. And I worked. I was the first person they hired to work in Manchester United's Hong Kong office, apart from the managing director who was appointed from the London office. So I worked in the Hong Kong office for Manchester United, and my role was to, with my colleagues, go to markets across Asia looking for new sponsorship opportunities. And that was from 2012 to 2015. After that, I joined Inter Milan, where I worked. For those that know Inter Milan's history very well, in 2015, the club was owned by an Indonesian businessman called Eric Tahir. So I moved from Hong Kong to Jakarta, where I worked with Mr. Tahir very closely and his team. And my role there was to look after the Inter brand, but also look after sponsorships, growing the sponsorship business, etc., across Asia, and then from there internationally as well. So I moved to Milan after Jakarta, and then we sold the club to a Chinese company called Suning, which I'm sure many of you are very familiar with. And then afterwards, I joined West Ham in London as the Chief Revenue Officer. And that's my experience and how I got into football. So a long way from where I was in Beijing, but that's how I got into football.
And that's really interesting, Rich, because I'm sure many people that are connecting here tonight and then will watch the replay later on are not coming from the industry already. So they're coming from other sectors, whether it's real estate or any other sector. So it's very interesting to hear your career path and your trajectory. And you said, well, what are the overlaps? But here we are today after a successful career in the football industry. So perhaps that's also an interesting point to highlight, no, for those that are here tonight, that you don't necessarily always need to have that experience in the sports or football industry initially, because it may be that you have transferable skills that you can use, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, I did play football growing up. I'll be honest, I wasn't particularly very good, but I have had an interest in football for many years. But I wouldn't have considered myself sort of a diehard fan, especially when you interact with a lot of fans that spend a high proportion of their disposable income and their time following their team across the world. So I think for those that aren't in the football industry but are really looking to get in the industry, then I think one of the things that can really benefit from that is having a good understanding of how football clubs are structured, how the leagues are structured, and really what they do. Because from the outside, you think of many clubs as being these huge companies, but in fact, many of them are very small. And so the industry as a whole, although it's broadcast, football games are broadcast globally, whether it's La Liga or the EPL or the other 5 European leagues, etc. Actually, it's quite a small industry, and once you've got your foot in the door, and you learn how things operate and you learn how to do your job well, you can spend your entire career in the football industry. You know, it's one of those industries where once you get yourself known and people know who you are, etc., you build up your contact base with the industry, then it's a fantastic place to be. The challenge to that, and I'm sure many people on this call will appreciate, is getting your foot in the door. And there's a number of ways to do that. For me, I wasn't actively looking for a job in the football industry, but I speak fluent Mandarin, so I had language skills and I had knowledge of the market in China, which was attractive to Manchester United. But you know, it's not about someone doesn't need to be able to speak another language in order to work for a football club, but there are other ways in. For example, you could look at potentially understanding what you want to do at a football club. You know, when I worked for those clubs that you mentioned, it was often that people would approach me or my colleagues and say, really want to work for your club, like I'm a huge fan, can you give me a job? And so, you know, sometimes I chat to those people, or my colleagues would, and you say, well, what do you want to do for the club? And they often didn't know. They said, well, I don't know, I just want to do something. You said, well, are you interested in sponsorship or account management or ticket sales, groundskeeping, you know, what area you're interested in? And often they just didn't know. So my recommendation or my advice to those on the call is this is a great opportunity, this course, to really get a better understanding of how football clubs operate, the different areas of the clubs, so that when you do, and we will obviously help with this process, but when you do approach those football clubs, you genuinely know what you want, what it is you want to do within those clubs. And that's the first hurdle. So you can speak articulately to the HR director or to someone within the club and say, I really want to work in sponsorship because of XYZ, or I really want to work in account management because of XYZ, etc. So that would be the two elements of advice. But of course, you know, there'll be people on this call, as you know, Diego, we've had students in the past who are professional football players who are perhaps coming to the end of their playing careers at all levels of the game, who are looking to transition into a more commercial aspect of the club. And that's also where we can help as well at SBI, because, you know, often players know a hell of a lot about what happens on that side of the team or the club, which is the playing side and the training, etc., but maybe know less about the commercial side and the challenges of running a club from an operational side. And that's something that I think the course also gives to those people as well, a much more rounded, balanced view.
Yeah, 100%. And we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of our presentation tonight. But I think it's a very good point that you mentioned, because that relationship that you have, football players with people from corporate, you know, from the corporate world, and coming together, it really does enrich the learning experience. So we'll mention that a little bit further on when we talk about the masters. But moving on, I think also it's interesting to understand, and this is further to your point about knowing the industry and how it operates, right? So if we focus on sponsorship and the current landscape in football, can you give us a brief overview, Rich, as to how you see it now? Because I'm sure you've seen it evolve over the number of years that you know, you've been involved in football and now consulting. So how do you see sponsorship now, and what do you think is the current landscape that we're facing?
It's pretty tough, actually. COVID hasn't helped. You know, all clubs are different, and all the way that clubs approach the market or trying to find new sponsors is different. The clubs that I work for, especially Manchester United, Inter Milan, it was really about getting salespeople on aeroplanes, flying them to meet with prospects, you know, potential sponsors face to face, to really sort of enable to build a rapport with them. And that's very challenging. Prior to COVID, you know, obviously it was easier. Since COVID lockdowns, etc., it's been very, very difficult. And even now, as Europe has opened up, for those on the call who will appreciate, there's other parts of the world which are still facing lockdowns, etc. So it's very, very challenging at the moment in being able to get in front of potential sponsors. But having said that, football clubs on the whole have adapted very, very well. We saw that Manchester United was able to secure a new shirt sponsor a couple of years ago in the midst of COVID. That's a real sort of accolade for the strength of their team there. But I would say, so COVID aside, because I'm sure everyone's sick to death of COVID. That's a challenge that everyone just has to grapple with. The other interesting thing about the sponsorship market is it shifts very, very quickly. So when I joined the market, when I joined the football industry and started working on sponsorships, as I mentioned, from Hong Kong, we were at Manchester United. We were rolling out a new product which was going from global sponsorships. So it means that sponsors have global rights; they can activate all over the world. And Manchester United tested a new package which was regional sponsorships. Hence why I was hired for the China market, and I had colleagues hired for other markets across Asia. And that was really about finding sponsors that didn't have a global coverage, so they wouldn't be interested in a global sponsorship because maybe they'd only be into one or two markets, but they still were looking to sort of strengthen their own brand by leveraging off a top football club. And so that was a really profitable endeavor for sort of 3 or 4 or 5 years. But just to give you an example of what I mean, if you think about carbonated drinks, and I know I sound a bit of a nerd here, but from a sponsorship perspective, it's not just Coke or Pepsi, but carbonated drinks category. When you think about global carbonated drink brands, you've really only got two. You've got Coca-Cola and you've got Pepsi. If I've missed some off, please someone let me know. So if you approach those two companies and you say, are you interested in a sponsorship package, etc., if those two companies are maybe doing different things, they're not looking at football that year, or they're looking more at a tournament rather than an individual club, etc., then that's your conversation ended. And so what Manchester United said was, well, there's lots of brands out there that are in the carbonated drink sector, but they're regional, they're not global. So to give you an example, I closed a deal in China in 2012 with Wahaha Drinks. I'm sure some of you have heard of it, probably most of you have never heard of it, but it was at the time one of the biggest drinks company in China. The chairman of the company, Tong Ho, was the richest man in China at that time. So this was a huge brand that, outside of China, people weren't that aware of, but in China, everyone knew about it. It was the Pepsi of China. And there are other brands across, say, South America, Southeast Asia, etc., which are in the same position. So that was highly successful. That was in carbonated drinks, but we did deals across a number of different categories, including noodles, which was an interesting one. There was curry powder. There are bed mattresses, which is now quite a common category, etc. So we really sort of broke new ground in terms of the new categories. The challenge with that, as always, it was great in 2012 up to about 2015, 2016, but then lots of other clubs followed suit. So that was one challenge. So when I first started at Manchester United, you'd go to a meeting in somewhere in Asia, and it was very rare that the executive you were speaking to had met anyone from another club. Fast forward 5 or 6 years later, I was working for Inter Milan, and the executive you're talking to in Kuala Lumpur or somewhere had already met with 5 or 6 clubs potentially that year. So football, it's a very competitive industry in the sponsorship as well as on the pitch, we all know, but off the pitch is very competitive as well. And then the third thing I'd say is the categories shift very, very quickly. So as I mentioned, we explored new categories and were very successful in sort of finding areas which were unexpected, like noodles and curry powders, etc. But what we see now is clubs are always looking to find where the new industry is. So I think a few years ago, we saw that the betting industry really sort of exploded in terms of sponsorships. And you still see that today, front of shirts or training kits or regional sponsorships, etc. We see that every club has a betting partner. And as people are probably aware, there's some domestic regulations coming in or have already come in places like Spain. The UK is talking about it, and other countries in the world. Iceland, for example, you can't have betting on the front of shirt. And so that is, and also the betting industry, the online betting industry is the market is already stabilized. So you don't see, you don't see betting companies investing so heavily in sort of or spending so much in their sponsorships anymore, especially in football. So then from betting, it moved on to crypto, and I think that's probably where we are at the moment. You know, you see a lot of crypto platforms or cryptocurrencies or NFT providers really spending a lot of money in the football industry, and that's because the industry is where the betting industry was 3 or 4 years ago. You know, there's a lot of growth in the industry. There's a lot of market players, and they're all trying to grow their market share before it gets too big. But for those that follow crypto, obviously the last month or so has not been great for the industry, and you know, we're seeing some companies pull back from some of their sponsorships on that. So as ever, the biggest challenge for commercial directors at these clubs is where next. And if I had the answer, I wouldn't tell you anyway. But I don't have the answer, I'm afraid.
No, this is really interesting insight, Rich, and it goes back to our point that we were saying before, right? For those that are looking to either start or advance a career in football, well, one of the main things that they need to understand is, you know, what's happening in the industry, because it shifts very rapidly. There's many areas that weren't relevant before, and now, as you said, with crypto, with NFTs, this is something that if you're not up to speed, if you're not aware, when you do have those conversations or when you have an opportunity, you may not be, you know, you're going to be in a vulnerable position if you're not aware of this. So interesting to hear, or as you said as well with the betting partners, that you know, nowadays it's becoming more and more controversial. And in Spain, they've passed the law where they're not allowed to be on the front of shirt. And as you said, in England, this is something that is very much in the conversation in this day and age, which probably will end up happening sooner rather than later. So further to what we were saying before, right, that in this case it's about sponsorship, but it does make the case that if you want to work in this sector, you really need to understand what happens behind the scenes and how it operates. So very interesting to hear that in that regard. Now, I'm sure as well when we have our audience tonight, they're wondering, well, I've never worked at a football club. I wonder how it's structured, what areas are there, and particularly if we talk about sponsorship, can you tell us a little bit about how sponsorship departments are structured inside a football club? Evidently recognizing that each club is different and it operates in a very different you know, structure, I'm sure. But from what you know and what you've seen, I'm sure it will be very interesting to hear your insight here.
Absolutely. I mean, Diego, as you've heard me mention on one of the classes that I give on the course, you know, really, I think, as you say, football clubs are different, but you could probably put them into different baskets, if you like. You've got your tier one football clubs, and I'm talking commercially here. I'm not necessarily talking about on the pitch performance, but your tier one football clubs, your global brands like your Manchester United, your Barcelonas, your Liverpools, etc. Now, their sponsorship departments will be pretty big, and they'll be well invested by the club, so they've got good resources. So you would be typically looking at maybe around 8 to 10 sponsorship salespeople, and their job will be to go directly to brands to see you know, what brands would be interested in a sponsorship, and that will be what we call category led. So you won't just randomly think about what brand you could call because you saw it on the side of the bus in the morning. You know, it'd be very strategically done. There'll be a sort of a 1 year period or 6 months beforehand where a team of analysts will look at what industries are growing, which industries are spending more in their marketing. So there'll be a lot of work done, and that, as I mentioned, that'll be done by research analysts. Once that's fed through the system and a category or certain categories are chosen, then the companies within those categories are identified, and an operations team will reach out to those companies. It will be either via a letter or maybe a small gift or something like that. And then it's the salesperson's job to actually, once they've received the letter or the gift, to get in touch with them, to arrange a meeting, and then ultimately to get on a plane and go and see them. So you know, all the fun stuff goes to the salesperson, as opposed to those in the back office. But so that's how the tier one clubs are run. You know, they're very well resourced and they have a very slick operation, and it's very strategic. Now, tier two is probably those clubs it doesn't matter which league, to be honest, but top leagues, where let's just say sort of outside the top six in England, and the La Liga equivalent. Now again, they're playing within strong leagues. Their games are broadcast around the world, and they'll have a sponsorship team as well. But it typically won't be as many people. It may be 3 or 4 people. And rather than go out to meet with companies around the world and have a very strategic year sort of approach to it with a big research team, that doesn't really happen from my experience. It's little bit more reactive. So often you get inbound calls, companies saying, we had a meeting with the club because they came and saw us, but we can't afford it. But but it's got us interested in looking at football sponsorship. Can we chat to you? That happens. Or often these tier 2 clubs, and again, tier 2 from a commercial perspective, they will use agencies. So agencies such as CAA or agencies such as Sport 5, and the agencies have the resources and the strategy to go out to the market, speak to companies, and to generate their interest in football. And often tier 2 or even tier 3 football clubs will rely on these agencies because they're just better resourced when it comes to finding sponsors. So I'll sort of try and give an example. If you look at the front of shirt sponsors at the vast majority of tier 2 football clubs, they wouldn't have been sourced necessarily directly by the club itself. They would have been sourced via an agency, a Sport 5 or a CAA, for example. Whereas if you look at the front of shirt sponsors, say at Manchester United, Liverpool, or Chelsea, obviously Arsenal's had the same one for many years, they would have been sourced directly by the club itself.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear about. Obviously, different clubs have different structures, and of course, the more, the bigger the club, the more people are going to be involved. But it's interesting that you mentioned as well the role of the agencies, because again, I'm sure that people listening in tonight are thinking, well, if I want to work in the football industry, I need to get in through a club, and of course, yeah, that's an avenue. But in many cases, it can also be, like you said, working with an agency that works with a number of clubs or a number of sports properties. And I know from talking to a lot of people in the sector that in many cases, those that end up working at clubs have initially started working at the agency level and then were the account managers with the club. And as a result, sometimes can even work at that club or other clubs because of the fact that they were involved in an agency. So something else to consider when you're initially looking to either start or transition to the football industry, that you don't necessarily need to start at a football club. You can start at another organization, and particularly with sponsorships, this is very much the case, that you can be with an agency and then move on and start working with a club as well, right? So interesting to hear that. Right now, the other thing is, well, what makes a successful sponsorship a partnership? I mean, you've worked in this sector for a number of years, so what would you say are the keys to make sure that a sponsorship is successful?
Yeah, I think it depends. It depends how you sort of look at that question, really. I worked in sales, sponsorship sales. So for me, a successful sponsorship is actually getting a brand to pay money to be your sponsor. So that's how I would look at that question. For those that are in account management, or partnership management, it would be looking at, how they successfully activate the rights in order to make sure that the brand reaches its targets. And then of course it's from the company's perspective. So the likes of a Chevrolet or an Emirates, etc. Their keys to success will be based on very different KPIs. And it really depends on the brand. For some brands like a Coca-Cola or a Pepsi, it's obviously not around brand awareness. They have bigger brand valuations and bigger brand awareness than probably any club on the planet. So for them, it could be different indicators. The indicators could be around engaging with a certain demographic. Maybe in, say, a certain country or a certain region, one of these brands is finding it difficult to engage with a certain demographic. Normally they target the younger demographic. So, football's a great way to target with the younger demographic in certain regions. But I would say from a football club, from a football club's perspective, it's based on really, I would say, generally um, two indicators. First one is it is about money. Actually, it's important. The job of accumulating more sponsors for a club is to drive revenue, because as everyone knows, especially at the top clubs, but even at the smaller clubs, the players are expensive. They take a very high percentage of your revenue. So yeah, okay, if we're talking about a top club like Manchester United, I'm based on, this is probably about 3 or 4 years old now, but their player wages to revenue income will be about 60%. When you're talking about a Watford FC, that'll be about 80%. And as you go further down the league, ironically, you're looking at a higher percentage of revenue goes to player wages. It could be as much as 90%, 95%, etc. So sponsorship is really important to clubs at all levels in order to try and help that player wage revenue ratio sort of not be so close to each other, to try and get some gap between them. So that's what I would say is key to successful sponsorship. But that's I have a very blinkered way of looking at it. But from a club's perspective, in addition to the revenue, the additional revenue that it brings, it's also it's a great way for these clubs to be able to partner with brands that have certain values. It's about raising your own awareness to a new market. For example, if a football club is well known in 80% of the world, but it sponsors with a well-known brand in a country that it's maybe not that well known or not that followed, then that's a great way for a football club to get better recognition within those markets, etc. So that's another key way for a football club to sort of indicate what's a successful sponsorship. But for the brand itself, really what it's looking at is being able to raise its brand awareness by piggybacking off either a team or a league. EPL and La Liga games are broadcast all over the world. I'm sure many of you from different countries around the world, or for those that have traveled in many other countries, generally you see people with engaging in football, talking about football. I always say this, sort of relate this story. I was at a conference in Beijing, and I gave my name card to this lady, and she said, "Oh, I'm really sorry, I don't know anything about football." And I said, "Well, have you heard of Manchester United?" She said, "Yes." I said, "What colour do they wear?" She says, "They wear red." "Can you name me a player?" She said, "David Beckham." I said, "Well, you see, you already know a lot about Manchester United." And she was really surprised, without even thinking that she knew anything about football at all, because she wasn't a football fan. Just through the strength of football, the power of football clubs and different leagues, etc. She already had an okay knowledge of the club I was at that time working for. So it just shows you the power of football, and that's what these brands want to buy into.
Yeah, no, very interesting to hear the different prisms that you can analyze sponsorships, right? Because obviously, if you're looking at it from the club perspective, as you said, there's different indicators that can justify it as a successful partnership or sponsorship, and obviously for the brand, it's that awareness, and at the end of the day, translating into sales or into some type of commercial growth for them as well, at some point, right? So interesting to hear from the different perspectives. I see that there's a few questions coming in the chat box, so that's great to see. We will deal with those in just a minute when we reach the Q&A period. So nice to see some questions coming in. Perhaps just a brief follow-up here, Rich. Digital more than ever is becoming very relevant in this day and age, right? And of course, COVID proved this. So is there anything that you want to share there as far as sponsorships in the digital age now, and how that has shifted, say, from, a number of years ago when this wasn't as prominent?
I think digital is one of those sort of catch-all words which means many different things depending on the context. So I'll just try and caveat what you said there. I mean, in terms of what digital means to football clubs, many football clubs have been talking about digital strategies for a long time now. Now, obviously, a lot of that's done for marketing purposes, social media, etc. And that's not the purpose of tonight's talk, but it is something that I know we talk about a hell of a lot during the course of the academic year, because it's such an important area. One of the challenges for football clubs, as Diego, I know you're acutely aware, it doesn't matter whether you're Barcelona, Manchester United, or Scunthorpe United. No disrespect to Scunthorpe. Is the challenge always that you have football clubs which their stadiums are rooted in one area, be it in Manchester or Liverpool or Barcelona or Madrid, etc. But the fan bases are around the world. There are fans in India, in China, in South America that are just as passionate as a club as someone who lives 100 yards away from the stadium. And the challenge for clubs is obviously you can't pick up that stadium and move it to the other side of the world. So one of the best ways for clubs to be able to engage with fans from around the world is obviously digital. And one of the ways to do that, as we know, is through social media, it's through digital platforms, etc. Because market penetration, mobile phone, internet penetration now is pretty high around the world. But there's also other elements to that, and this is one of the challenges that football clubs have. So for those people trying to get into football, if you have ideas around this, you'd be a huge asset to a lot of clubs out there. Is how do you help the sponsors, be able to leverage off your digital platforms in order to sell more products? Because the obvious answer is, well, just put ads on your on the club's digital platforms. But the challenge of that is always, you're just going to turn off the fan base. Fans go to club social media chats not because they want to look at what the coolest hat to wear is or the newest trainers to wear are. They do it because they want to engage with the club. They want to know what the players are up to. They want to know any new buys, any new transfers, what was the result of the game, etc. So one of the challenges that these top clubs especially had is that they have a lot of sponsors. And so a lot of the sponsors want the digital assets in order to advertise their products to the fan bases around the world, the hundreds of millions of fans around the world. But of course, that dilutes the experience that the fans have when they're reading these digital and the social media platforms, etc. So I don't have the answer to that, and I don't think anyone has yet. And there's talk about having club apps behind paywalls. So you have a version which is free, but it's got ads embedded in it. And then if you want to have the challenge is always you still need to satisfy the assets that you've given to your sponsors. So if the vast majority of your fans are using a paywall, they're paying the money to be able to access through the paywall, then you've got a challenge there as well. So to be honest, I don't have a good answer for that question. And if anyone does, certainly get in touch with a few clubs because they'll be very, very keen to hear.
No, this is really great. This is really great because, again, it tells us that even though there's a lot of hype around a lot of these terms, in some cases it's about understanding what is the real value and how that can be, put forward. So interesting from that perspective. Well, there's one more question that I had, Rich, before we turn it over for our audience, which I see that is starting to share some questions in the chat box. And I think this is going back to the first point that you mentioned before, right? But there's people out there that we talk to regularly that say, well, how do I get started? How do I position myself to work in the football industry? And in this case, obviously the focus is sponsorship. So what tips, what advice would you give to those that are looking to work for a football club in the sponsorship department, and how best to position themselves as candidates that could have a shot at, at getting in?
I think this question I'll answer this specifically to those who are interested in working in sponsorship and already know that that's what they want to do. I would say ask yourself, a very, very honest question and be honest with yourself. What do you offer? What do you offer a football club in the sponsor or the sponsorship department of a football club? And then have a think about what you offer. And if you genuinely offer them something that they need or want, then happy days. Start sending out your CVs and start building your contacts, etc., or leverage off hopefully contacts you'll make, like myself and Diego. But if you think about that question, you think, well, actually, I don't know, then obviously we're here to help. But have a think about what it is that you could offer them, and then you map your way to gaining those skills. So for me, what I offered Manchester United, which was my first job in the industry, was the fact that I spoke Mandarin Chinese and I knew the Chinese market at that time pretty well. And that's what they wanted. So that's what they wanted. That's why they hired me. And then when they hired me, I was then able to learn other skill sets like social media and all the different things. And I also did the SBI course on social media, etc. Like I said before, it's not only about languages, it's also about other areas as well. So one of my colleagues at Manchester United, he worked in logistics. And so he worked for a logistics company in the UK. And then he approached Manchester United and said, I work for logistics companies. I know the industry really well. I know that a few companies are looking at sponsorships. I can help you, Manchester United, understand the logistics markets. I've got contacts with all the companies. I can get you in front of them, and I'm confident we can do a sponsorship deal with one of them, etc. And that guy, he was right. They Manchester United after that signed a deal, I believe, with DHL, etc., based on some of the experience that he had. So your experience doesn't necessarily have to be, I've been a fan of the club all my life. Some clubs like that. Diego, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Barcelona like it if you're a fan of the club, if you work there. But other clubs, they don't care really. I've worked at a club before where there were colleagues who were fans of the rival clubs. It didn't matter. For the sponsorship department, as long as you can make money for the club, you don't even need to be a football fan. You need to be able to talk about the club and you need to show passion, etc. But really, it's about helping the club make money through sponsorships. So if you can think about what you offer to a club, how you can help them make money via, through sponsorships, either through your connections or your knowledge or a skill set that you have, then think about that. That's your trump card. And if you haven't got that, then think about how you can get it and map your way there. Because just based on my own experience, when I worked at clubs, quite often I would get people approach me or send me messages via LinkedIn. I want to work for your club. But they didn't really know what they could offer. They just wanted to work for the club. Well, that's me helping you, but how are you going to help me? I don't mean me personally, obviously I mean the club. So think about how you can help the club and what you can do for the club. And obviously when it comes to sponsorship, that's about making the club money. How can you help the club make money? Not just once, but over a sustained period of time for a number of years. That would be my advice, Diego.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, that's really great advice because that's something that, as you know, Rich, we always tell our students and our alumni because, and of course the people that are considering the programs that we offer, because many times we hear of a lot of people that have, they're very knowledgeable. They have great experience from other corporate sectors, and in a way, they may be frustrated and say, "I know I can work in the football industry. I just don't know how. I don't know what the way forward is." And that's why we're here, and that's why we're there to help. And it's precisely that, understanding what you bring to the table, what value you deliver, because the more you look at it from the other side, the better position you have to, offer something that may be valuable to a club, to an agency, or to another organization in the industry. So something to think about. That said, we're going to move on to the Q&A section in just a moment. I see that we have Ricardo and Richard that have put a couple of questions already there. So thanks, guys. We're going to deal with them in just a moment. But as I mentioned, I did want to take this time to briefly outline what the Master in Football Business Management encompasses, because I think for many of you, I know that several of you that are connected tonight have already done the Masters. Many of you have contacted us and are interested in doing the Master for next year, or for this year coming in October. And I won't take very long, but I do want to just mention what the program offers for those that may be considering it. So it is a master's program in football business and management, which basically means it's like an MBA. The only difference is that it's not focused in business as a whole, but the business of football particularly. So everything that we deal with is industry oriented. We have identified keys that make you have a better shot at either starting or advancing a career in the football industry. And based off of those, we've created and we've designed the master's program in a way that, like I said, it's very practical and very much oriented towards helping you advance a career or start a career in the football industry. The first point that we focus on is optimizing your knowledge, ensuring that you have updated, relevant knowledge about the industry that is aligned to employment skills required in football. So everything that you learn throughout the course is delivered by people working in the football industry that are able to provide this updated and relevant knowledge. As Rich was saying before, crypto, NFTs, everything's shifting very rapidly. Well, we make sure that the curriculum reflects this every year so that when you finish, you have all the skills required, all the knowledge to position yourself as somebody that understands the industry as a whole. Obviously, network. We all know that network and the people that you know and that you are able to connect with makes a huge impact on the success that you are able to have in any sector. So we very much focus on this, helping you build a network with football industry professionals that we have contact with, that we bring as speakers, as mentors, and also the students themselves, who many of them are already working in the football industry. And that allows you to build those relationships while you're studying so that when you finish, you have a wide network that allows you to, grow and optimize your opportunities. Another area that we very much focus at SBI is making sure that we deal with everybody at a personal level. What does that mean? Well, we don't take you as a number. If you're a student, we want to know what your aspirations are, what you want to do, because the more that we can help you, the better that is for our mission as well. So we, about 5 years ago, we set up a personalized mentorship program, which essentially makes sure that we find out where you're at today and where do you want to be. And based on that, we identify the gaps that you need to fill. So we essentially build a roadmap, a career roadmap with you, obviously based on your objectives and your aspirations, but it allows you to have more clarity, and especially talking to people who have done it before. So you're not just talking to any mentor, you're talking to mentors such as Rich, many others that have vast experience in football that are able to guide your career. And we all know that in any sector, the more you accelerate your path, obviously the better you're going to be in, because the later you start or the wrong turns that you can avoid obviously help moving forward in your career path. So mentorship in a personalized one-to-one manner is something that we're very proud, because it's worked very well in helping people really achieve success and work in the football industry. And then the last couple points is practical experience. We offer numerous internship opportunities at football organizations. So that allows you to gain firsthand experience, whether it's in a virtual internship or in a face-to-face environment. We help our students, especially those that don't have experience in football, get their foot in the door. And then the last point, which is something else to think about, is it's flexible learning. So we have live online weekly master classes, very similar to what we did tonight. Obviously, tonight is different because you guys are muted and this is a webinar. But in a classroom environment, what we would have done is we would have had a presentation by the speaker, and then everybody interacts, shares opinions, asks questions, and essentially it becomes as though you're in a face-to-face environment. The only difference is that you're connecting from your computer from, wherever you are in the world. This, on the one hand, allows you to connect with people from all over the world. And then secondly, it also allows you to do this in parallel to your other professional commitments or academic commitments. So you don't have to, take a year off to do this program, because you can do it while you're working or while you're taking care of any other commitments that you may have. So something else to think about. Very briefly, and I'm running out of a voice here, so I won't take too much time, but the methodology is proven. We have an online campus where you have resources, obviously accessible 24/7, and this includes presentations, videos, reports, articles, you name it. It's a one-stop shop where you go in, you get everything you need, and you access it whenever you have free time. Usually that takes about 5 to 8 hours weekly to complete on your own. Depending on the week, it may be more or less. And then every week, we have either 1 or 2 virtual live masterclasses where you connect on this same platform. And like I said, it's a dynamic session where obviously in the case of a class, everybody would be unmuted, asking questions, interacting, a bit different than tonight, where it's more of a webinar format, of course. We also have online workshops where we have cases, because we believe in learning by doing. So in these online workshops, which are usually on a bi-weekly basis, so every 15 days, we put cases to you forward where you have to think on the spot, where you have to act, where you have to basically put yourself in a position so that you're prepared when you finish a master. You've already been exposed to these types of situations that allow you to act in a way where you're not improvising, but you've seen this throughout the year. And obviously there's assessments and a final project that we finish off. Like we said before, there's a lot of football players that do this course. So odds are that when you do the master's program, you're going to be studying in parallel to professional footballers. Every year for the past 5 years, we've had, whether it's 5, 6 different players, some of them at the top level, including Premier League players, as I mentioned before, other Latin American players, and Spanish players as well, that obviously being based in Barcelona, we were able to connect with them. So this is a very unique experience that you have at SBI as well, that you're able to connect with students that are currently playing football. We have a partnership with a university in Miami, USA called Florida Global University, which has a campus in Miami. And what this does is the degree is recognized, certified by Florida Global University. So that adds another academic stamp to the course itself. Finally, and now we're going to move over to the Q&A section. The reason we wanted to mention this is because we have an early bird discount that we've extended up until this Friday. The course fee is 6,500 euros for the 8-month master's program, which includes everything that I mentioned before. But if you apply before July 15th, that means if you submit your candidature before July 15th, you are entitled to a 500 euro discount from the tuition fee. So if you want to learn more, go to our website at sbibarcelona.com, and we'll be glad to answer any questions about that. Excuse me, I just need grab a little bit of water while we turn it over to the Q&A. Excuse me. Right, so let's move over to some of the questions, Rich. You probably have seen that there's a few that have come up. So the first one that I saw was from Riccardo Corsolini. So rather than having myself or you read the question, Rich, we're going to try and see if we can bring Ricardo online here and have him ask the question himself. So 1 second while I'll try and get this done. If we're able to do that, and if not, we'll just read the question. Sorry, it looks like Ricardo has sent something in the chat box where he's not able to unmute, if I'm not mistaken. So let's go ahead and read the first question. So Rich, he asks, how could a sponsorship manager control how a sponsor is reliable? And he talks about iconic and other fan engagement blockchain brands that fooled many clubs.
Yeah, it's a great question because it is actually a problem. You could even say it's quite a big problem, and it has been previously. I think the best way to mitigate against it is to do due diligence. So, for example, prior to signing a contract with a sponsor, especially if it's come via an agency, is number one, make sure that the money, you don't activate the sponsorship, so you don't announce the sponsorship formally in the press. You don't start activating the assets, such as on the digiboards or on your social media, etc., until the contract has been signed and the money is in the bank. A lot of clubs that make the mistake of being told, oh well, if you just launch now, we'll pay you in 3 months time, etc., etc. Absolute recipe for disaster. Always best to not officially launch the partnership or the sponsorship until the money's in the bank and the contract has been signed. Because even if you have a signed contract, the reality is if your sponsor is based in another part of the world where maybe there isn't as strong arbitration rules, there's almost no recourse in order to get your money back. If it's here in the UK, then you know what the legal system is. There's there's law courts that you can go. There's arbitration, etc., and you can try and get your money. But in other parts of the world, it's very, very challenging, and it can end up costing the club more money to try and get the money that they were promised as per the contract. So I think due diligence is always important. Is the brand reputable? Do they have a good reputation in paying their sponsorship fees on time? Also, it's just down to a little bit of gut feeling. Does the sponsorship manager or the commercial director, etc., do they think that they're a reliable sponsor? Are they gonna pay? There's a lot of clubs, big and small, and I know some very big clubs that have had trouble with this as well. In fact, I remember when I worked in the industry, when I worked at a club, a colleague of mine at a different club who was commercial director said he was starting to feel a bit more like a debt collector, because his job was just to call up existing sponsors to try and make sure they pay on time. Because obviously a lot of these sponsorship deals are 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, and you pay on an annual basis. So what often happens when you get to the last year of a sponsorship deal, maybe the company feels that it's already had as much exposure as it's going to get, so it just doesn't pay the last year. That's not uncommon. So it's a great question. Unfortunately, there's no simple answer, but really it's about working with sponsors who are reputable, who pay on time. There's a good level of trust there. But commercial directors are under a lot of pressure to get new sponsors, to keep revenue going up, and often it happens that commercial directors feel pressure to sign on a sponsor which may not be as good in terms of reputation and on paying, etc., as they would like. And then they just think, well, that's a problem for another day. That does happen as well. I'm quite risk averse, so I didn't like that approach. But I know some clubs that are not. They just think sign it on today, we'll worry about it tomorrow. That also does happen as well.
Very interesting. Yeah, thanks for the question, Ricardo. Richard asks, most community clubs just want or need money, so accept or ask anyone for sponsorship. So what would be a better way to plan and approach amateur potential sponsors, amateur club potential sponsors, rather?
Yeah, it's another good question. It's a really difficult one. Like I say, no simple answer. Sponsorship is a very funny industry from an economics point of view, because if you think, okay, Arsenal FC, I know you're talking about community clubs, but let me start here. Arsenal FC, let's say for argument's sake, their front of shirt sponsor pays £30 million a year. So that means that the top of the championship, maybe they should get 5 million. And then you go and work all the way down to the community club based on size, and you extrapolate the number based on Arsenal's number at 30 million, that we should get 50,000. But it doesn't work like that, because, you know, for example, the reason why a club like Arsenal is 30 million is because they have truly global coverage. They have fans all over the world. Whereas if you get a club which doesn't have a global fan base, only has a local fan base, then it really isn't about someone paying, you know, the value being, well, we think the price of this front of shirt is 50,000. It doesn't work like that. The way it works is, what is someone willing to pay? Because, you know, your iPhone, for example, you know how much an iPhone is worth because it says so in the shops. And, you know, Apple has put that price on it because they've worked out through their supply chain what all of the components costs. They know what their overheads are. They know what their labor costs are. And then they need to make their profit to keep their shareholders happy, etc. So then they give it a price in the market that they know will sell. And of course, if it doesn't sell, they'll lower the price, etc., etc. Now, it works very differently with the front of shirt at a football club, because there is actually no reason. I mean, some of these companies try and put, some of these analytics companies try and put science behind it by saying, well, the front of shirt at club X should be worth 50 million. And they give loads of reasons of why it's worth 50 million. But to be honest, I've never convinced. The reason why it's 50 million is because someone is willing to pay 50 million. You know, there's no, you can't, there's no other way to sort of say, or to quantify how much it's worth. It's worth what someone's willing to pay for it. And so when it comes to the community club, it depends on many different areas. Where are you located? So, for example, if you're in South London, maybe, you know, you've got a lot of clubs, a lot of companies around there. Generally, the southeast of England, for those that aren't aware, is the wealthier part of England, say. So you might have a better opportunity to get a sponsor at a community club in say South London for more money than you would potentially in, say, for example, rural Spain or something. You know, it really depends on your area. It depends on your it depends on the companies that you have around you. So Brighton FC is a great example. Brighton in the south of England, Brighton and Hove. You know, Amex is their front of shirt sponsor. Why? Because Amex has a big office in the area. You know, Leyton Orient, I think they had Dunkin' Donuts, I think, was their sponsor. Why? Because the owner of Leyton Orient was I believe the chief executive of Dunkin' Donuts, or was linked to the company, etc. So more often than not, the sponsors that you get, even at the top clubs, but also at community clubs, it depends on your geographical location. It depends on the companies. It depends on the people, the fans that you have, you know, etc. I think there was a story, I remember years ago, that Oasis wanted to sponsor Manchester City, Oasis, the band, because obviously they were big fans of the club. So I think there's no general answer to that. And a really good commercial director, whether they're at big clubs or small clubs, but especially the small clubs, they will have a really good knowledge of the people in their area, and they'll be able to use that and build contacts with those people in order to get them to sponsor. Because whilst companies sponsor the clubs, it's also a people-to-people business. You know, do you like the commercial director there? Do you like the CEO at the club? Are they nice people? Are they people you can relate to? You know, because often for these companies, especially at community clubs and the smaller clubs, it's just wanting to be part of the club. You know, I want to go to the games. I want to feel special. I want to sit in the director's box, etc. And sponsorship in that sense can be a gateway into the club. So many different answers to that question, but it is actually quite complex. But hopefully that sort of gave you an answer.
Excellent. So maybe we'll take a few more, as I know we've run over time a little bit. But
there's a good question from Alex, if that's all right, Alex King.
Yeah, go ahead, Rich, if you wanna read it out, and we'll tackle that one.
So Alex asks, I'm a recent business and marketing graduate who had a recent internship at Oxford United, which is third tier of English football. I'm looking to work in commercial, sales, marketing, or football clubs, but struggling to get my foot in the door. I've had final interviews at Fulham, Charlton, and Bristol Rovers, but fell short. The same feedback is inexperience in the industry, but if I keep getting rejected, how can I get experience? It's a fantastic question, and there's people I'm sure on this call who can really sympathize with that experience. It is always a chicken and an egg syndrome, whether it be football or any other industry out there. It's about getting your foot in the door, as I'm sure you're aware, Alex. All I can say is there's a number of ways that we can help you. Number one is about doing the course. We had a student last year, a chap called Bobby, and I think Diego and I are hopefully going to invite him to do one of these panels like I've done today. And you know, he had the same issue with you as you did, and over the course of the 8 months that he did this academic program, this masters, we were able to help him. He was able to build up the knowledge that he needed. Now he still had a lot of interviews, but we can happily say he's now working at Birmingham City FC, and he's got his dream job at a football club now, and now he's got this first job, as I'm sure you're aware, Alex. You know, now he's got his foot in the door. He can, if he wants to, stay in the football industry for the rest of his life. Not necessarily at Birmingham, but now he's got that experience that you're looking for. So that's something that we can definitely help you with, and we've got case studies and we've got experience of dealing with that. But it's not just about doing the course alone. It's not just a question of saying, oh, here I have a master's, therefore I have the experience, because that may not just be enough. What it's also about is we will give you the knowledge of how football clubs operate, and we'll also help you to if you like, use the right terms, use the right lingo, because often in these jobs, in interviews, as I'm sure you're aware, as long as you sound confident and you use the same language as everyone. And to those that don't understand what I mean by language, I don't necessarily mean English or French or Spanish. I just mean using the right terms or the industry terms and the jargon that people use. That gives the interviewer the confidence that you know what you're talking about and you're someone that understands the industry. And that's something that we worked very closely with on a number of students last year, and especially Billy. Sorry, it wasn't Bobby, it was Billy that we helped last year get a job. And even in my own experience, I was working for Manchester United, but I was looking for a promotion, and I didn't know very much about social media or digital marketing. And I did an SBI program, an online program. And when I had an interview with another club, they asked me about social media, which was going to be one of my remits. And I could speak so much more confidently about digital marketing, social media, having done the course. So although I wasn't an expert on it, if you like, I knew the right terms. I knew what people were talking about when it comes to digital marketing. And that gave the interviewer the confidence that I was someone who knew what they were talking about. So I think keep your head up, keep getting those, keep applying for those jobs, because the fact that you're getting the interviews is already really good, because a lot of people get turned down even at the interview stage. So the fact that you're getting interviews at those clubs is already a really positive sign. All you're just lacking is a little bit of luck, and something that we can help you with is helping you to create that luck, if you like, helping you get more knowledge of the industry, use the right jargons, and then of course, through the coursework that we do, give you a much fuller appreciation of the industry, and then that will really shine through the next time you do these job interviews. And we'll do interview practice with you, and we'll help you through that, like we help Billy and the other students as well. So keep persevering, and keep trying, and we can certainly help you with that as well.
100%. Yeah, no, that's great. We had another question from Justin Bretonneau, who's coming in from France. He mentioned before. So Justin asks, perhaps if we can talk about the differences that you experienced working for Man United and West Ham.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I've noticed, even at the clubs that I've worked at, or having interaction with people that work at different clubs, every club is different. It's an amazing industry to work in, because even clubs that are just down the road from each other, be it Manchester United and Manchester City, or Liverpool FC and Everton FC, these clubs, the cultures are very different, the historical roots are very different, the people that work there are very different. It's a really fascinating industry. And so I would say that the differences are that, as I mentioned sort of quite a long time ago in this discussion, the clubs like Manchester United, that, no disrespect to West Ham, but have truly global fan bases around the world, the likes of Barcelona, Real Madrid, Chelsea, Arsenal, etc., are the same. They really are, from a sponsorship perspective, geared up to go out and get the sponsors themselves. They run events all over the world. They do, these clubs do fan activations, fan parties all over the world. And it really is set up as a global business, really. Although it's very small, only a couple of 300 people maybe, they're run as global businesses. They do activations all over the world. West Ham wasn't really like that. West Ham was very much, although it's an EPL club, and I'm not just saying this about West Ham, it's an amazing place to work, and a really great bunch of colleagues, and a fantastic culture there. It was like a club like Everton, etc. It was still very much sort of catered for in its geographical location. It didn't focus um, on sort of the global marketplace, if you like, because that wasn't where its fan base was. It was still very much localized to that perspective. And that's not saying that West Ham didn't try, and we didn't try at West Ham. But the reality is that you have, if we just talk about the English Premier League for now, but you have top four clubs which have truly global fan bases that have been built over time of just winning things. Liverpool, Manchester United, Liverpool in the was it Liverpool in the 80s, Manchester United in the 90s? When I could be in the middle of in Malaysia, in just a town somewhere, and someone would want to talk to me about sort of John Barnes, or they'd want to talk to me about sort of Roy Keane or something. These are the kind of things. These are the historical memories that people have around the world, that doesn't matter how good your social media feed is, you're never, it's very difficult to build up that kind of historical sort of memories and legacy that you have with a lot of the fans around the world. That takes a lot of time. And I think Manchester City have been finding that, and they've done a great job. But it's taking them a long time, as is natural, to build up that global fan base, because and it's been done through winning the Premier League, and winning the FA Cup, and probably one day winning the Champions League. They're starting to build up those memories that people will have from across the world supporting that club. So I think really what I would say is not focusing on Man United and West Ham specifically, but there are a few clubs around the world that are truly global, and the rest are more localized in their activations and in their fan base.
Oh, that's excellent. Well, I see that there's quite a few questions, and unfortunately, we won't get a chance to tackle all of them, but maybe we'll take one or two more. I see one that has come up just recently here from Nicholas, and he says, I'm VP of Sales and Marketing and Hospitality, Hotels and Resorts. I think Nicholas mentioned he's German in Maldives, if I'm not mistaken. And he says, you think that's a good base to go into sports management and later get the chance to work for a club? I do speak also 4 languages, but already 47 years old.
Well, I would say, Nicholas, that yeah, I think there's a lot of crossovers there. VP of Sales and Marketing is already a good place to be. Think about some of the overlaps, some of the skill sets that you have that could be of benefit to a football club. So, excuse me. People think, well, football is a sport. Well, yeah, it is, but at the same time, it's also it also has very large fan bases. So, I know that hotels, they don't just see the people that stay there as customers, they see them as people that they can engage with from a brand perspective as well. So there's going to be a lot of overlaps there. There's going to be the same things that you have to work on in your current job. It's about being polite. It's about how do you engage with your customers, because you don't want them to stay at your hotel once. You want them to be repeat customers. You want them to keep coming back. It's about you helping to understand that. So there's a hell of a lot of crossovers that you have in your current job with hospitality in a football role. So I think that, yes, there's a good opportunity for you to work in the football industry. In terms of your age, I mean, age is never an issue, really. I mean, football clubs are fantastic places. You get people as young as 18 or 17 on an internship, and often in football clubs, you get people that have worked there 50, 60 years, because football clubs are institutions, they're cultural institutions. There are people that have worked there all their lives. And these people are important to the club because they're the people that pass on the history and the culture and the legacies, etc., and the stories. So I would say that age isn't an issue, but obviously being a VP, you're going to want to go in at a more senior level of a football club. And that means it's about management of people. So, people that can manage people is effectively always a very strong asset. So I think in terms of making the transition over into football, you don't need to work on your skill set because that's already there. You maybe need to think about what the crossovers are, so you can write a list down of the skill sets that you have and the skills that are applicable to the same thing in football. But there's a lot of crossover there because it's hospitality, and football obviously has hospitality as well. So I would just be thinking about, where do you want to be located? Because I think you said you're located in the Maldives. Well, as far as I'm aware, the Maldives doesn't have many football clubs, certainly not ones with hospitality. So you may want to think about where you want to be located. And then when you work out where you want to be located, then start to approach those football clubs to see what positions are available. Hospitality directors tend not to move on that much because it's a pretty good job. So timing is important as well, because you're slightly more senior at a VP level. There'd be less jobs there. If you were just a junior salesperson, you probably pick up a job very easily. So that would be another challenge that you would have as well. But again, through the process of undertaking this program, you would meet people on this program, guest speakers and others who are in those roles, or people like myself who know those people in those roles because I've worked for them for many years previously. And so that would help build up your contact base, because what it sounds like you need is, you have the experience, but you need the contact base, and then you need to work out where you want to actually, which club you want to work for, be it which location. So they're the two challenges you've got on that, but we can help with the first one, definitely.
That's a really good point, Rich. And just further to the question that Nicholas was making, I think also, obviously, you have a lot of experience having worked in hospitality, but one of the areas that you could also benefit from this master, or any course out there, is understanding the football industry itself, because there are certain idiosyncrasies that I'm sure are going to be, interesting for you to learn and to understand, and that are going to be able to position you as a better candidate. The other thing is, this type of master's program that we offer, we normally have students that are as young as 18 years old, and we've had people in their 50s. And we believe that the cohort that we bring together, we don't necessarily want a certain group of people. We take in the right profiles so that people are able to collaborate together. And I'll give you an example. Someone like yourself will have a wealth of knowledge and experience, having worked in hospitality and hotels for many years, and you can bring a lot of your experience to the discussions in the master's program. But then there's people that are 18 years old or very young, that maybe don't have the experience in the corporate world, but perhaps understand the game, how it's being consumed today, and you learn from them, and you understand a lot of what the industry is or where the industry is shifting from a consumption standpoint, that then allows you to add value to your own knowledge and to your own transition if you are looking to get into the football industry. I would echo what Rich said, that sometimes moving into the sports or the football industry sometimes requires somewhat of a sacrifice in the sense that if you're in a very high level position in the sector that you're in now, but it's not necessarily where you see yourself or where you want to be, sometimes it means maybe taking a step, to the side and probably having to work a little bit harder. But then once you're in, you can definitely leverage that experience that many people don't have, which is those years in the sales and marketing and hospitality, which will be very beneficial. So on that note, Nicholas, hopefully that helps and adds a little bit of value to what you're saying. Rich, I know we're running over time here, and I want to be respectful of your time, so we'll probably take one more, and with that, we'll wrap it up. So let me just have a look here. There was somebody that was asking here before. Saeed, he says, I've been president of my football clubs in my nation country as Iran. My main question is how to define rights of sponsors in countries where there are no copyright laws. Not sure exactly what that means, but perhaps
I can sort of elaborate on that. I mean, I'll give you an example. So it's really important that, let's say, football clubs that are global, that have a global footprint, that they register their trademark in countries that they need to register it. So I'm not an expert on Chinese copyright law, but I remember that a number of football clubs like Barcelona, like Real Madrid, Manchester United, etc., although they register their copyright, obviously in the UK, European Union, etc., they had to do it again in China. And that is because there's a really high profile case a number of years ago, and it was ongoing for many, many years, between the French apparel brand, what's the one with the crocodile? It's Lacoste, right? Lacoste, yeah. So with the French apparel brand Lacoste and a Chinese brand, I think it was called Crocodile or something, and the logo was almost identical, and Lacoste had a horrendous battle over many, many years, probably almost a decade, fighting copyright infringement in China. For another case more related to sports, although Lacoste is tennis, and that's Air Jordan. So Nike Air Jordan brand, there was a very similar brand in China. I think I can't remember what it was called now, but it had a very similar logo of like Jordan with the basketball, etc. And that again was ongoing for a number of years. Now, Air Jordan did win the copyright court case, but it went on for many, many years and cost the brand a lot of money. So in answer to your question, and I know I focus on China, but it's applicable to around the world. If the copyright, check with the law firm, but you may, just because your logo is registered in your home country and maybe in places like the United States or the European Union, etc., you may need to also register the copyright in other countries as well, such as China, maybe India, I don't know. Hopefully that answers the question.
Excellent. Yeah, very good question and very specific. So thank you for that. That said, Rich, I want to take time to thank you for your time tonight, for speaking on this fascinating subject and bringing in your experience, your tips, your advice, which I'm convinced that for many people tonight, it was very useful and very valuable. So thanks to you, Rich. Thanks, of course, to everybody connecting and participating in the webinar tonight. And thanks for the great questions. Apologies for not being able to get to all the questions, which were really great. But I've left in the chat box there our website, sbibarcelona.com. Have a look around the website. And if you want more information or have a question that was left unanswered, send us an email. We'll be glad to connect with you, learn more about your background, what you're doing, and perhaps how we could help. So there's the website on the chat box. Here's our information as well, in case you want to contact us via email. We have a WhatsApp number, which is there on screen, 636-293-097 with the Spanish area code of +34. So you want to maybe note that one down if you want to get in touch with us. send us a WhatsApp message. Someone from the team will always be replying within a 12 or 24-hour time span. And with that, hopefully we can get in touch with you, learn more about what you're doing, and if there's an opportunity that you're looking for and you're at a point in your career where you think, I want to take it to the next level, I want to work with my passion, perhaps SBI and what we offer is the right fit for you. So let's have a chat and let's connect. So that said, Rich, any final thoughts on your end? And with that, we'll wrap up.
No, thanks, Diego. No, just thanks to everyone for your time this evening, and hopefully we'll get a chance to see you next academic year.
Fantastic. So thanks, everybody. Thank you, Rich. Have a great night, day, or evening, wherever you're connecting from. And we'll hopefully see you next time. All the best, everybody. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.